without any support whatsoever.
Everybody fled.
Turkish.
Everybody.
Wow.
So the population of Kobani, I would say, this is approximate, maybe 50,000 back, in 2014. And the surrounding villages, 340, 50 villages.
Yeah.
All fled.
All fled.
All fled. No one was left. Everybody fled. There is nowhere else to go because the Turkish border is the closest border to Kobani. It's just like
and where did
10,
they
15
flee to?
kilometers, not even that.
Did they flee? Where did they flee into?
They fled to
Turkey?
the border there. They stopped.
And there was...
Well, they fled to the border, but then, thank God, back then Turkey opened its borders and they fled into Turkey. So it was a catastrophe, People were sleeping on the streets, in parks. It was in September. Next month will be 6 years.
You're listening to Justice Matters with Tim Buxton, a podcast inspiring the fight for a world where everyone belongs. It's good to be with you for another episode. Today's guest is SBS journalist Mayada Khalil. Now, she is a Kurd from the town of Kobane in Syria who migrated to Australia back in the early 70s. She was then just a teenager who came to Australia with her family. And as we were talking off camera just after recording the episode, she was sharing with me how she's always had this personal desire to be a voice for others. And I guess that's what drew her into journalism, something she's wanted to do from a very, very young age. And not only has she been a voice through her journalism, but also as an interpreter for refugees when they come here to Australia to find and start a new life. She's done that tirelessly, and I've been so inspired with her along the way. Now, I've known her for about 5 years. She would call me up while I was living in Kurdistan in the northern part of Iraq there, and she would interview me, and over the years, we've kept in touch. We've done some interviews for her in Australia through youBelong, but this time I get to be the one interviewing her, and she gets to be a guest for me, and I really can't wait for you to hear her story today and to hear this episode. You're going to learn so much from her as she shares, and I think you're going to be inspired, truly inspired by her life and her work. This is my chat with Mayada Khalil. May, welcome to the Justice Matters podcast. It is so good to have you on.
Oh, thank you, Tim. After all these years, all this time, we've been speaking and talking on the phone, but, I've interviewed you a few times, but good to see you too.
I know. How does it feel to be on the other end of this phone call?
Yes, I know.
And I'm interviewing you. I'm getting to
you've
out
turned
of
the
you.
Table. Yeah,
exactly.
You've turned the table around.
Oh, my goodness. But, this is the first time we've actually seen each other face to face.
Yes, it is.
And this is as good as it gets with all the COVID restriction and Zooms everyone's doing these days.
Yes.
But it really just... my face lit up when I saw you because I could just.
Thank you.
It's been wonderful to get to know you over the years. I remember the first time you reached out. I think we would talk back and forth when we were living in northern Iraq.
In Kurdistan,
in
Kurdistan region, yes. And I think I did interview you once from there. I can't remember. I can't recall, or maybe after you got back to Australia. So yes.
Yeah, we've done a few, and obviously with the work that we've been doing in Toowoomba, with the formation of youBelong, and just welcoming Kurdish speaking and refugees from Iraq and Syria now that have been coming back or coming to Australia to settle. It's been great still getting to get in touch with you and talk with you from time to time.
Yes, it is good, isn't it?
Yeah. And you've been busy, of course, and we'll get into some of the ways your incredible skills and your connections in the community have been put into good use to serve those families that are coming here to Australia. But I would love to really just kind of kick things off and just get to know, get behind the scenes of your story, May, because you are a Kurd from Syria, from Western Kurdistan region, and for a lot of people, it's hard to even pinpoint where is Syria on a map, let alone where is Western Kurdistan.
Oh, it's Kobani. If you say Kobani, I'm sure everybody would know.
Exactly. Kobani, it was a city that really, I mean, I'm thinking right now at this, what happened in Lebanon just last week with the terrible, terrible blast that ripped through the heart of Beirut and really decimated much of the city. To be honest, when I saw that, my heart also went back to some of the images and pictures of Kobani, the city that was surrounded by ISIS on the Turkish-Syrian border those many years ago when ISIS was really in the middle of its heyday.
Yeah,
and
that was in 2014. I mean, there isn't a comparison between what's happened in Beirut, which is unfortunate, and heart goes to those people.
Right.
But it was completely two different. I mean,
two different situations.
Situations, as you know. But the Kobani is now, it's being rebuilt.
Yeah.
But there is still work to be done. And,
I mean, this city was absolutely destroyed by ISIS. I mean, I've seen drone footage. In fact, my friend of mine, colleague, went into Kobani literally just after it was kind of, you wouldn't say liberated, but after ISIS kind of finally gave up. And even that whole story, it's a miraculous story, and maybe something we could talk about. But Kobani is your hometown, really, isn't it?
Yes. Well, I was born there. Yes, but I've spent most of my life here in Australia, so that's how I was born there. And until my early teens, I was there, and then Mum and Dad decided that's it. We've got to come back. To migrate, and we came to Australia.
So that was back in the early 70s?
Yeah, early 70s, mid 70s. Yes, mid 70s. We came. My mum, dad, and 4 siblings.
Wow. My parents migrated to Australia. Now, from England now, under completely different circumstances, but still, I mean, to think that my parents and your parents decided to move to Australia almost the same year,
exactly,
at the same time. I mean, that's kind of interesting and kind of special.
Yeah.
May, paint the picture for us, would you? I mean, obviously, Syria and the region throughout the Middle East has been in constant upheaval and war and violence, and it's certainly not a place anyone, in these conditions would want to raise a family. What was it like back then when your parents left, and talk us through that whole journey from your perspective as a young teenager?
Well, back then it was obviously, not as, war-torn as now. And I mean, it wasn't war-torn. It was no war. There was nothing there back then. But it's just Dad decided that, through to other probably situations, circumstances, maybe political circumstances. I was too young. So that's why. But there wasn't any, as there is now, a war was happening. No, there wasn't. We weren't refugees. We migrated. My dad, migrated here. And arriving in Australia was in June. It was June, and I could still have that smell when we arrived in Australia, that, it was cool. It was early morning. The sun was rising. Wow. It was beautiful. Yes, it was. When you go somewhere, or when you have some memory of that place that sticks in your head. And to me, there was a distinct smell when we came. It was a beautiful smell.
Wow.
Yeah,
How amazing.
yeah. So when we arrived here, obviously my uncle was here. My mum's brother was here. He was married. He's married to an Australian lady. And we stayed with him for a little bit and then moved out, obviously. And then back then there weren't many Kurds, the Kurdish community. No one even knew what Kurds are.
Justice Matters is brought to you by youBelong. If you'd like to learn more about their work, empowering refugees to integrate and thrive in Australia, head on over to youbelong.org.au. There you'll find ways to get involved, volunteer and financially get behind the several initiatives they've got going on. There's also a stack of articles and blogs that you'll find there that are really informative and engaging. Now, did you know this podcast is actually a video podcast featured on YouTube? Just search Justice Matters TV on YouTube and watch each episode right there. And while you're there, hit subscribe and get notified each time a new video drops.
No, you'd say, yeah.
There might even be many listening that still kind of can't really piece, where are the Kurds? Who are the Kurds? Maybe would you kind of share for our listeners who...
Yeah, well, the Kurds are a nation who speak Indo-European, which is nothing like Arabic or Turkish or the closest language to Kurdish would probably be Persian, for they come from the same tree.
Yeah.
So Kurdish is an Indo-European language, and Kurdistan was divided during the First World War. The French and the English divided Kurdistan among Iran, Iraq, Turkey, and Syria. So those countries have a slice of Kurdistan each. So there's
some would even argue maybe not Armenia itself, but there are many Armenian Kurds as well.
Yes,
right.
Yeah. Well, there are Kurds in Armenia as well, but I don't think Armenia is part of. No, because Armenia is not part of.
Definitely.
Kurdistan. Yes.
But you occupy quite, the Kurds as a result are spread throughout those regions quite considerably.
Well, the population of the Kurds, believe it or not, it's estimated at 40 million, 35 to 40 million.
40 million people.
40 million people. A state.
No country.
People that.
Stateless.
Yes.
40 million people stateless.
Yes.
That's just mind-boggling.
Yes, it is.
Australia's 30 million?
Yeah, 25.
Yeah, 25 million. So
yeah,
almost double the size of Australia, and they don't even have their own state.
That's right. Yet you have other states in the Middle East or elsewhere. There's only a couple of 100,000 people, and they have their own state, and they cannot their own state. So that's a bit of a briefing about the Kurds and Kurdistan.
Yeah, and that from the time I spent living in Kurdistan region of Iraq.
Yes.
There's definitely something to their identity of feeling that sense of, some of the sayings, some of the proverbs that they even share amongst themselves as we are the orphans of the universe. And
of course.
And the mountains are our only friends in this feeling of deep betrayal, of being second-class citizens, of just really not feeling like they have the freedom to be a nation, to practice, to even in many places even speak their own language.
Yes, which that has now improved a little bit, speaking your language, because in years and years ago, for example, when we were back in Syria, of course there's no schooling in Kurdish. No, we weren't educated.
Everything was Arabic, right?
Everything was Arabic, And I remember, you'd be punished if you spoke Kurdish at school. There were punishments.
Wow.
But it's come a long, long way now. Even in other parts. So, but now because there is the Kurdistan region, that's why everybody loves going to Kurdistan region, because that is the only part
Right.
like we're liberated or governs
That
itself,
has
even
some
though
sense of autonomy,
yes,
yeah.
some sense of autonomy, even though there is a central government, Yeah, so that's
So your family, your dad with the sense of like, I guess, you know, you know, love for his children and wanting to make sure that he gives them the best chance at life, joins his brother, your uncle here.
No, his brother-in-law.
His brother-in-law, okay.
So
They move.
Yeah.
Your aunt, sorry.
No, my uncle.
Yeah.
My mum's brother is here,
It
not
was
my
your
dad's brother.
mum's brother, okay.
Yeah, my mum's
I'm glad
brother.
we got that right.
Yeah,
so your mum's brother,
yes.
and so they rejoin. I'm sure that was a happy day when you guys came here and
Of course, yes. And Dad, God bless his soul, he passed away. It is exactly today, 12th of August, 1994, 26 years ago, Dad passed away.
May.
So today, yes. Yeah,
wow,
he had
what a
special, very, very special man in my heart.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Wow, thanks for sharing that, May. That's real special. I think I went to several funerals, and whenever we would see families, we would say, Khoda l'choshbi, or
something like
something.
Sare wa sarbe, or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, and this kind of indicates, the Kurds have very different dialects as well. But I do.
We've got quite dialects.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well.
Yes. So
God
that's
bless him and your family, and what he must.
Thanks.
I'm sure he's looking down, thinking, what a very, very proud father to see the ways you guys are.
I hope so.
Carrying on the legacy. So your uncle, interesting fact, started the first Australian Kurdish society. Is that association? Yeah.
Yes. He Shaheen Baker is his name.
Yeah.
He founded the first Australian Kurdish Association, of course, with other members of the Kurdish community. When we arrived in Australia, in 74, it was Kurds. It was only a handful, not even a handful, but mainly were Kurds from southeastern Turkey, so from Kurdistan, Turkey.
Yeah.
And they were here there was, I think, late 60s, there was something between the Australian government and Turkish government for people wanting workers. So they would, just to come and work here. So there were some families there, but none from, say, Syria or other parts. And, I think there were a couple of families from Kurds from Syria, but none from, say, Iraqi Kurdistan. Back then would have been called Iraqi Kurdistan. And then gradually, after the 1988, the chemical attack on Anfal, slowly the Kurds, started to become refugees, and then in the first Gulf War and the second Gulf War, and that's when the influx started to come. And of course, lately, what's been happening, Iraq and Iran, and Syria, Iraq and Syria, and the ISIS situation, and that's So there are
just wave after wave. It seems. It seems kind of a bit. It's depressing, honestly, to think of the how many different conflicts and that have forced displacement over the years.
But there is a saying in Kurdish: "We will never fall. We keep on getting up. We fall and we keep on getting up."
And I tell you, your positive attitude in it all is, I think, testimony to that. The way you whenever I speak with you and talk with you, you're so full of hope, which I love. In the midst of
You've got to be. Otherwise, we would have been destroyed by now. That's why. even despite all what's happened, despite all the oppression, the Kurds, even though not being educated in Kurdish in most parts, the only part that was educated in Kurdish was in Iraqi Kurdistan. There was some kind of an autonomy, and in primary there was Kurdish was taught, but in the other parts, no, Kurdish was taught. But the language, verbal, kept on going. Like for me, for many other people coming, like I came to Australia, I self-taught myself to read and write in Kurdish.
Well, what was that like? I mean, you come as a teenager. You don't know any English, I'm assuming, when you get here?
I had basic English through school. We had one lesson a week of school.
Okay.
You know the alphabet. You know the basics of grammar a little bit. But,
so that would have helped.
Yeah, it helped.
At least get a start. But what was it like when you first got here? I mean, you talk about the smell just being, this is amazing. But, got to have been some struggles.
It was hard, especially for my parents and especially with my auntie, my uncle's wife, Robin, because, English speaking, you couldn't communicate in the beginning, but thank God Robin spoke a little bit of Kurdish, so her and mum and dad would, speak, but, it was difficult, but it was okay.
Yeah. And you had that society that your uncle, or the association that your uncle began, the Australian Kurdish?
The Australian Kurdish Association, which was formed in 1979. That was the first Kurdish association in Australia. So here. And
you got quite involved in that, I hear.
Yes, I did. I did get involved in it. Even though being so young. So, but just getting to know the community, introducing the community to the broader communities here, to let them know who are the Kurds, it takes time for people to realize or to know, it took time for people to know who are the Kurds. I mean, even though until now, not many people know. But
today it does.
Just
a lot of education.
It's better than it used to be.
Yeah. And I'm sure I could imagine those that are newly arrived to Australia, I mean, to be able to go to your community and your group and just feel a sense of familiarity, at least maybe for them, it would have been a help, no?
Let me tell you, back then, the Kurds, because the community was closely knit.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, at the moment, I don't know, it's the association, I don't know, but because of the different political parties, and I'm sure it's all over the whole world is like that, but that's natural, because of political, things.
Differences.
Differences and different ideas, different ideologies. So it's just,
So you almost need an association for each small little group. Is that kind of where you kind of saying? The Kurdish communities, it's all right. It's like, even though there's a bit of a division, but that's okay. and right now there's been a recent, opening of humanitarian refugees up until obviously COVID restrictions have stopped all flights coming in. Where there were many Kurds from Syria and from Iraq and Yazidis and other Assyrians and other those from various ethnic and backgrounds were coming here. Yeah.
Yes, there were quite, because aside of being a journalist, I am an interpreter as well, so I am involved in those. A lot of Yazidis arrived, which they speak Kurdish Kurmanji. And quite a few families from Kobani have arrived, and also from other regions in Syria, like Kurdish regions in Syria, have arrived. But the majority, I'd say, are Yazidis, of course, of what's happened.
The genocide.
The genocide, which is very sad. we've got, I'm sure, a majority of have arrived in Toowoomba in Queensland. We've got some in Wagga Wagga, in Armidale, and in Coffs Harbour. These three regional areas in this New South Wales. Yes. So yes, there has been, but as you said, lately because of COVID, no flights have,
allowed others
allowed others, but hopefully,
Now you mentioned some from Kobani, and I want to kind of touch back on that just for a bit, because I'd love to just hear how you got into journalism as well, and a little bit about that too. But Kobani, we kind of mentioned it at the top of the episode here. It was surrounded by ISIS, and only a few remaining Kurdish fighters were in without any support whatsoever.
Everybody fled. Everybody.
Wow.
So the population of Kobani, I would say, this is approximate, maybe 50,000 back, in 2014. And the surrounding villages, 50 villages.
Yeah.
All fled.
All fled.
All fled. No one was left. Everybody fled. There is nowhere else to go because the Turkish border is the closest border to Kobani. It's just like
and where did
10,
they
15
flee to?
kilometers, not even that.
Did they flee? Where did they flee into?
They fled to
Turkey?
the border there. They stopped.
And there was...
Well, they fled to the border, but then, thank God, back then Turkey opened its borders and they fled into Turkey. So it was a catastrophe. People were sleeping on the streets, in parks. It was in September. Next month will be 6 years. In parks, anything, until, camps and things were organised. So, and then 4 months later, when it was liberated, Kobani, then people slowly went back. But only the people who went back, only people who had, say, farms or machinery. For example, my uncles who have farms and villages and, homes and a lot of machinery. We're talking about tractors. Harvesters, other machinery, ploughing machinery, that they had to take them all with them to Turkey and then bring them back. And my uncle said they couldn't not go back. They had to go back because, you can't just leave it deserted there. So they went back, but the young ones, majority of the young ones didn't go back. Majority of the young ones.
And so maybe some went on further into Europe or
a lot of my cousins are in Europe. I've got a handful, went back to Kobani, but more went to Europe. So it was a very sad time, a very say depressing time back then. Because you wouldn't know what's going to happen. It, as you said, 90% of Kobani was destroyed.
Absolutely decimated.
Destroyed. No, buildings, nothing.
I mean, that must have just been awful for you to know that your family are over there and your home,
so
your hometown is absolutely destroyed.
Absolutely destroyed. But it's it's built. Not all of it, but it's getting there. It's getting there.
Wow. Well, I mean, and how is it? So now it's kind of there's a small population back there again.
There is a small. We'd say about maybe 60-70% of the people is back. Majority of it is still built, but one side of it is still destroyed. The people who cannot afford to build again, I don't know how they're living. They didn't go back, they just left, or they went to Turkey.
But overall, there's kind of still this limbo. There's this quest for Syria and Kurdistan, Western Kurdistan, to kind of be liberated as well, and for them to have their own kind of Kurdish state. And is there still talk of that? I mean,
the Kurds would love to have that, but let's be realistic. At this time, and this, I too, this is my opinion, I don't think this will happen now. Let's go step by step, First of all, get your
get
cultural
organised.
rights.
Yeah.
Get your cultural rights first, then ask for an independence.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a long process, kind of
It
like
is
you said, even.
process. It's a long process. I mean, I think the majority of Kurds in Syria say, we would be happy to have our cultural rights, be educated in Kurdish, and Arabic, of course, but, just get cultural rights first and some political rights, maybe have representatives in the parliament as well.
Right.
So, yeah, step by step.
So even though Kobani is being rebuilt 70% population, what is the atmosphere like though right there at the moment?
Tim, the reason I'm talking about Kobani is because my family, my uncles and aunts, relatives are there. So that's why I'm more familiar with that area or that town. Yes, it's being like it's built, let's say 60, 70, maybe to 80% has been built, but it's still it's quite a bit of it still, being destroyed. And they're still living. People are still living in fear because they don't know what's the future holding. They don't know what's tomorrow or the next hour is holding. There is that fear. Yeah.
And it makes me think about the family members that are coming here to Australia, and not only have they experienced indescribable suffering. I mean, the pain and the trauma that they've endured. They've probably been waiting for years in a refugee camp to finally get permission to come here. They get here, they have to leave family and friends behind. They don't know. They hear the news of what's going on in Afrin or in other parts of the region, and they worry sick about how their family are doing. And here they are, maybe even feeling guilty that they're here.
Yes,
there's so much suffering, right, that they're going through.
Yes, they do. Speaking of being guilty, most of them feel guilty. Say, I almost feel guilty. They say that I'm here and the rest of my family or the rest of my brothers or sisters are still there. What am I doing here? If I can't, if they can't come here. So there is that guilt too. But on the other hand, they are very, very grateful, to the Australian government, who they're able to come to Australia. Very grateful, yes.
And you've had the opportunity to really help firsthand. You're a journalist with the SBS. What's your role with them that you have?
Well, I started with SBS years and years ago when it was founded by Mr. Shaheen Baker, the Kurdish program, back in the mid-80s.
Wow.
And later on, back then we only had maybe one program a week.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, and then I was going there as a contributor, and then, gradually, when the program became 2 programs a week, so that's when, I was, put on as a casual, and then, gradually working there.
You built it up and grew it, yeah.
But we only have 2 programs a week on Fridays and Sundays, and so that's how I, started with SBS Kurdish program. But my other job is also working as an interpreter, interpreting for the non-English speakers, the Kurdish speakers, not English speakers.
Yeah.
And I've been involved, with government organizations and with non-government organizations. I try my best to help, people, assist people language-wise,
You have a huge, huge heart, and you've travelled many times to these rural communities, to Armidale, to really help.
Wagga Wagga. And to Coffs Harbour I have, yes. So, yeah.
And what's that experience been like? I mean, how as you've kind of firsthand kind of interacting with these families and the community, what's it like? What are some of the challenges? What are some of the good stories that are coming out of what's happening?
Well, unfortunately, the most recent refugees are the Yazidis, the Kurdish Kurmanji speakers. I don't think there are any nice, stories. They're all sad stories.
Yeah.
That you hear, and all, I can, move to journalism now. That's through my interviews, a lot of interviews that have been done, they're very sad stories. And of course, through my interpreting, again, a lot of sad
You've had
stories.
to listen and interpret and translate some awful.
Yes.
How do you do that? How do you carry those stories yourself and listen to them and not? They've got to affect you some way.
Well, let's say humans are, there's a saying in Kurdish, humans are made of blood and flesh. So of course it affects you, but then you have to be, show brave and your professionalism that, it doesn't affect you.
Yeah.
But of course it does affect you, eventually.
Yeah. Well, you have a huge heart, so I know you're able to carry those stories and find a place to empathise with those families as you listen to them, but also, kind of continue the incredible work that you do. I've enjoyed speaking on the phone to you in the middle of one of our picnics up in Toowoomba, and you hear the music in the background.
Yes.
and despite again all the suffering, it is wonderful to see them when they do get out and they do dance and they do. I mean, that it's a special thing to be able to do in the midst of.
Yes, I think dancing, music is the Kurds, or it's a way of showing, of a little bit of happiness, a little bit of forgetting a little bit, just be in that moment.
What would you say to the Australian community as it's kind of, the established Australian community that's receiving again new families and over the years we can continue to open our doors from and borders to refugees. We some would argue we could be doing a lot more. But what would you say to the established community on how we can care for these families, how we can embrace them, what are the ways that we could
Well, I think, Tim, the Australian community, or in the broader community, I think they do embrace refugees or migrants in general very well, because comparing to other places in the world, they don't, Yeah. But Australia does embrace, or Australians do embrace refugees and migrants very better than some other parts in the world. It's just,
Yeah, no, for sure. Is there any advice, someone who's gone through the journey yourself in terms of migrating here?
Tim, I can speak on behalf of myself. I've been here 40 odd years, 46, 47 years. I've grown up most of my life here. I have never, ever been discriminated against. I have never been called names. I have never, ever been through anything like that. So I cannot say anything because I've never been through it,
That's beautiful.
So I have never, ever been through anything like that. So I guess I'm lucky, but maybe other people have. Not. But I can only speak on my behalf. I can't, speak.
Yeah. No, and one of the beautiful things I'm seeing, and I've witnessed even in Toowoomba, and I think it's important we really draw attention to the good stories, is we see a community of people, opening their doors. The mayor,
Yes.
Paul Antonio is so open and so doing some incredible work in local councils, and there is such even a unity amongst community groups and churches to really embrace and to really welcome them in, which has been a tremendous thing.
They do, like, especially in regional Australia, like they embrace so much, like they welcome so much, like for example in Armidale, Wagga Wagga, Coffs Harbour, and there are some Kurds in Newcastle as well, in New South Wales. See the members of Parliament are embracing them, which is very nice. Let's talk about the good things too, not
you not only focus on the
negative things. Yeah.
And that's what I love about your story. There is so much hope. There is so much, I think, a reminder, a belief that as Australians, we are a welcoming people. That is who we are. And so, let's continue to live into that as our identity. Let's continue to move forward and project that into our future, because
that's why I love Australia.
Yeah. Oh man, and the richness. I think we're reminded the richness of what what is Australia. Australia is a land of so many people coming together. On this incredible sacred ground.
Welcomes people from all over the world. No difference between this and that or that religion or this religion. Everybody is welcome here.
Yeah. And it's beautiful. And I even get that feeling too when I do listen to a welcome to ceremony, ceremony at an event, and you hear the Aboriginals, Indigenous community welcoming people, and it's a reminder that is the heritage that they've passed on to us. It's the heritage that this place is, and it is beautiful. And I'm certainly glad. May, that was your experience, and makes me proud to be an Australian.
I am proud to be an Australian too.
Yeah. So, looking to the future, what gives you hope? Like what's on the horizon for you?
Nothing special on the horizon. I take the day as it comes.
Yeah. Tell me about your children then. How old are they now?
Oh, well, I've got 3 children, 2 girls and a boy.
They're all adults?
They're all adults, yes, adults. So, yes, and my husband who's working, who manages a furniture shop. So, yes, and he only retired from his radio programs recently. He was doing a radio program called 2000 FM, or multicultural, a community radio. He was involved in it for 30 years. So he gave up, only recently. So yes. So and I've got a daughter who is a journalist.
Wow.
My other daughter is a lawyer, and my son's still studying.
What's he studying?
He's studying. Well, he's different to the girls, boys. He's becoming an electrician. He started at the university with physical education and all that, but no, so he's stuck with. He's an electrician.
Oh, awesome! Yeah. That's great. Well, hopefully he finds what he really enjoys.
Well, I think he's enjoying this one.
Oh, good. Wow, you've got a lawyer, you've got another journalist in the family. So incredible. And your son, an electrician. Will we get to see you up in Toowoomba? I mean, that's, fingers crossed, one of my hopes is that when the travel restrictions kind of ease up, maybe in 2021, we've got to get you up to Toowoomba.
Maybe, and that's up to, that's up to SBS and the management. If we can get up there, it would be good.
Yeah, I think that would be wonderful. We'll definitely have to pull a few strings to try and see if we can make that happen. I'd love for that. Really would. How can people follow your work? You mentioned you have a radio. There might even be some listeners within the Kurdish community, even if they share. But how can they keep in touch with with your work?
SBS Kurdish. Well, SBS Kurdish has got a website. It's www.sbs.com.au/Kurdish. That's the website. And then SBS Kurdish has a Facebook page, just SBS Kurdish Facebook page. Yes, that if anyone wanting, they can follow. On our website, on the SBS Kurdish website, there are many stories, interviews. There are some majority would be in Kurdish, but there are some in English as well. There are articles in English. So there is a variety of subjects. A lot of things on there. Yeah.
And I think the most important thing for me, as this podcast is about creating a more beautiful world where everyone belongs, and what does it take to create a world where people there's a more inclusive world, a more just world, a more loving and welcoming world. One of the first places we can start is to listen and to learn. And programs like SBS Kurdish and other programs out there are a great place to start. Like if you're living in Toowoomba, and you're noticing that there's families from all around this beautiful world of ours, I'm sure you could find resources.
Well,
where you can learn.
For example, SBS has say 74 languages, and I'm
74 languages.
Yes. So I'm sure, there are other communities that could benefit from
I grew up
the Kurdish community.
I grew up every night my dad would listen to SBS World News. And I just loved, feeling like I was connected to the world, just because we would get fed information what was happening everywhere. And I'd jump on SBS, the app they have on the iPhone, and there's so much incredible resources out there that you can listen and learn and really understand. Understanding is, I think, the number one thing when we learn from each other and understand, and that we all have, I think, unfortunately, Hollywood and other forms of media just kind of really paint for us such inaccurate depictions of reality and the people around us. And there's so much to learn. I'm grateful for services like SBS that have those opportunities. I've certainly learnt from them over the years, and love the work that is being done. And I'm grateful for the part you get to play in that, May.
Thank you so much, Tim. Thank you for your kind words, and it was lovely speaking to you at last.
Well, it has been wonderful chatting with you, May. And I've been calling you May because that's how you're known in the Australian community. But amongst your Kurdish community, you're known as Mayada. And that sounds beautiful, lovely name. And it's wonderful to have just finally had the chance to catch up with you. I'm really, really glad you agreed to come on the show. I kind of had to twist your arm. You didn't really want to come on.
You did
it. You are... Yeah, you've been someone who I've really enjoyed keeping in touch with over the years, and I learnt so much from you and really appreciate your heart. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you very much for inviting me, and all the best.
Well, there she is, the lovely Mayada Khalil. I hope you enjoyed the conversation that I had with her. She's an incredible human being, giving back to her community, giving back to refugees and other migrants that are making Australia home. She's a phenomenal correspondent for the SBS and just does an incredible job there. Go check out her work at SBS Kurdish. If you'd like to hear the rest of my conversation that I have with her, you can head over to patreon.com/Justice Matters. For as little as $5 a month, you get access to this bonus content. You can actually be a patron for just $1 if that's what you're able to give to help us to continue to produce this show and to make it available for free for others out there. I'd like to thank Sue McDonald for coming on and being a supporter of youBelong. Thank you so much for your support and your generosity. It means so much to us. Now we're off to the credits, and I'd like to kick things off by thanking my main man, Jose Biotto. He is the audio-visual engineer and does a fantastic job, just producing this show. I really appreciate you, my friend. The music that you hear on this podcast comes from John Art and David Gungor. They're also known as The Brilliants. Go check them out. And lastly, if you're enjoying the show, give me a high five, whether you're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or if you just want to subscribe on YouTube. What it does is it really provides incredible feedback for other potential listeners. It helps get the word out, and it makes a big deal to us in really being able to continue to provide and produce this podcast. I really appreciate if you have just a couple minutes to do that. That'd be awesome. Guys, join me again soon for another episode of Justice Matters. I'm your host, Tim Buxton. Thanks for listening.